which is one of rejoicing. Rejoicing in the Lord, rejoicing in the coming of Christ, rejoicing in the day which God has given us. And this is the theme reiterated in all of our familiar hymns. The one we just sang, Rejoice, Emmanuel is coming. How shall we rejoice? How shall we show forth our rejoicing? In the 1950s, I was chaplain at the University of New Hampshire and attending many conferences of young people from colleges, and I met there a very wonderful, charismatic preacher named Dr. Herbert King, who had Grace Church in Harlem. And I said, Dr. King, will you come and preach to my students at our morning chapel? And he said, yes, I will, on one condition, that you come down to Harlem with your students and worship with me. And so in the spring of 1955, I took 15 of my young people, mostly from rural New Hampshire, from little small country churches, and we took the train down to Harlem, and we spent Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night with families in Grace Church, Harlem. And I preached in Dr. King's church. And I will tell you that was a revelatory experience for me, and especially for my students. Because those people in that Grace Church, that black church, they knew how to rejoice. Their singing was ecstatic. Sometimes they got up and went up and down the aisle when they sang, and they raised their hands in praise and adoration. And the sermon was sort of a dialogue. If I would say something that they agreed with, they would say, Amen. I don't suppose any of you would say that here this morning. Amen. Amen. Good for you. That was the spirit of the preaching and of the singing and of the rejoicing. And on our way home on the train, my young people from these little country churches in New Hampshire had never had an experience like that church in Harlem. And they said to me, why is it that the people are so full of rejoicing and express themselves so freely? And I said, well, you have to understand what their lives were like. When they lived in the South, under segregation, they were not allowed to do anything that you take for granted. They couldn't go anywhere to eat. They couldn't travel easily. If they went overnight, there was no place to stop. And their lives were constricted. But one place for them symbolized freedom, and that was their church. And there they heard how the Israelites had been in captivity for 70 years in Babylon, and how long they waited for someone to lead them out of captivity. And this theme in Isaiah and the themes in Advent spoke to them. God will come, Christ will come, and we will someday be free. And so in their churches they could express themselves and rejoice and rejoice. But how shall we express our rejoicing? Certainly in singing the hymns of Advent, it's been wonderful to have the young people from the colleges and from the churches come into our midst while we are eating supper the last few nights in Pitzer and sing carols to us and help us to get into the spirit of rejoicing. But the real genuine way to express rejoicing is by giving. Giving. We can't all give money anymore. I don't know what your mail is like, but I have a big pile on my desk of envelopes appealing for all the different charities. I think I have 15 of them right now on my desk. And I will give a little bit to some that I have taken part in and believe in, but it is the season to respond to the hungry and to the poor and to the sick as the gospel tells us. There was an amazing story in the paper this last week about a man named Mr. Stafford, who made a fortune in the computer industry in the Washington, D.C. area. And he knew how many people would come to the inauguration of President Obama in January. But he thought of the people who wouldn't have a chance to participate or see it. And so he reserved 300 rooms in the fanciest hotel in Washington for the homeless people on the streets, and for those in the VA hospital who had lost limbs and could hardly walk, and for several who were dying and would not live very much beyond the inauguration. And he reached out and reserved 300 rooms for these people and 2 ballrooms so these people could have a celebratory dance as other people would have. And they asked him, why did you do this magnificent gesture to the homeless and the handicapped and the ill? And he said, well, my Bible tells me that to whom much is given, much is required. And God has given me much, and so I want to give back as much as I can. What a kind of symbol for our season. So we can't all give money, and we can't reserve ballrooms, but there's a lot of things we can do.
Last month.
We can be responsive to those around us. We can say thank you to those who help us every day. We can give a smile to people who come into our presence. We can sing, sometimes to ourselves. I sing to myself to get to sleep almost every night. And we can give God gratitude in our daily life and prayers. That's the way we rejoice. And why shall we rejoice? Because the whole Advent season tells us that Christ has come to give our lives purpose. It is no wonder that one of the best-selling books that sold millions of copies in the last few years is a book by Rick Warren, an evangelist, and it's called The Purpose-Driven Life. And when we relate our lives to Jesus